It was a bit of curiosity, really. I was sailing with a Chinese second officer,
Mhm.
and he was always on his phone, always on TikTok. And you hear about TikTok and all this, and he put a video one day, and I remember it got a few thousand views overnight, and I remember thinking, wow, that's really cool. And he was just providing a little bit of an insight to the Chinese audience, and he kept saying, Joe, have a go and do it.
Hello, and welcome to Series 3 of the Nautilus Pod, Offcourse, a sideways look at life at sea. This series we're calling The Influencers because it's chock-a-block full of interesting stories from merchant navy seafarers who are making a splash on socials. The content being created and shared by these fabulous folk has been seen by literally millions of people around the world, which means by definition, they are challenging and changing perceptions of working at sea, which of course is what this podcast aims to do too. So there are a few other changes to this series. We have launched on YouTube, so you can watch us as well as listen to your favorite maritime pod. So do subscribe if you like, and it will also ensure that you don't miss any episodes of this series. And of course, I have taken over the reins as the podcast host, or should I say, I have wrestled the reins off of Robert. But don't worry, he's not that far away. Robert is back with me today to discuss our fabulous maritime influencers. Hi, Robert.
Hello, it's good to be back, albeit in a different position now, Helen, than before.
Yeah, it's slightly weird, isn't it? How are you feeling about the job swap?
Yeah, good. Look, I think I loved hosting the first two series, but because of other things and other changes to the job, I think Helen, you're the right person to take it on, especially with this series and the and influencers. I think yeah, I'm excited to sit on this side of the podcast.
Yeah, the pressure's off, isn't it?
Yes.
You get to do all the fun things and I have to do all the
Yeah.
hard work. But in all seriousness, so everyone's aware, Robert is doing some additional work with our colleagues and really good supporters, Unions 21. So that is why we have done the job swap for this year, isn't it, Robert?
It is exactly, yes.
Yeah.
I haven't just decided to leave or hand it over. I couldn't be bothered doing it anymore.
No, absolutely not. We know that you really enjoyed doing the first two
Yes.
series, and I
Yes.
loved being on board for that as
Yeah.
well. This series is going gangbusters already. I think you're absolutely going to enjoy every single episode. So, as I said, we're calling this series The Influencers because we've interviewed loads of maritime folk with really, really big followings on social media. And the reason we're talking to them is because the whole reason we launched the pod was to try and raise awareness of the maritime sector and jobs within the maritime world, and really to try and cut through some of that lack of awareness in the public around how important maritime is to our everyday lives and how important those workers are. So as you're aware, Robert, you know that we've been surveying the UK public about their attitudes and their awareness towards the maritime industry in our Maritime Barometer survey. It's now been running for 3 years, I think it is. We're up to our third survey. And one of the key things that we ask in each of these is what percentage of imported goods do people think arrive into this country by sea? Robert, why do we ask that particular question?
Yeah, Helen. Well, as you said, we call our survey the Maritime Barometer, and all of the questions we ask. And I think this is one of the first questions we ask because it's a really good barometer of the public's level of understanding of the maritime industry. We're an island nation. We rely so heavily on the maritime industry to get goods into the UK, importing and exporting goods. And I think what we have seen in the past is that people have actually underestimated the amount amount that we actually rely on shipping to get us all the things, to get us the food on the table itself, the TVs you watch, the furniture in your home, everything, nearly everything, it comes by sea. And so this question, I think, is just a really good barometer of the public's level of understanding of how much we really do rely on shipping as an industry.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you're right. People do underestimate, the volume of goods that arrive into this country by sea. And again, this year it was the same. You'll be interested to hear that most UK adults think that about half of all imported goods arrive by sea. It's actually more than 90%. Of all of those imports. So, quite a big gap in the public's understanding, but that's why we're here. That's our job, to try and help people better understand our reliance on maritime trade and the maritime workers who are in that industry. So the subject of our first episode, or should I say the person on our first episode, knows all about goods arriving by sea. Joe Furness, otherwise known as Joe the Sailor, is a deck officer who has worked on some of the world's largest container ships before moving over to tankers which carry oil and gas. Joe is a digital creator. He makes fabulous content that kind of breaks down all of the complex information about working at sea so that, people without that knowledge can really truly understand. And he makes some really interesting, insightful videos. And I'm really excited to start off our series 3 by speaking with Joe. So let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the Nautilus Pod. Today I'm with Joe Furness, otherwise known as Joe the Sailor, a digital creator of fabulous content all about life at sea. I'm really excited to be speaking with Joe today. So hello, Joe.
Hello, how are you?
Really good, thank you. I'm really, really happy to be speaking with you. For those people out there who might not know who you are, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us about what you do?
So hi, I'm Joe, currently sailing with Sea Peak. I'm a chief officer, and we transport LNG all around the world. Prior to that, I worked for a long time on containers with Maersk and have cross-trained over.
You've said a couple of things there that I know our members will know about, but perhaps listeners and viewers who aren't seafarers might not really understand. So you're a chief officer. What exactly does that mean?
So chief officer is responsible for all of the cargo and the stability and the general sort of day-to-day running of the vessel. So in terms of, being kind of like the line manager for all the deck crew. So we take care of, everything to do with the deck.
And deck crew are those seafarers who work on top of the deck, navigators. So really break it down for us if you don't mind.
Yeah, so in simple terms, the deck, we drive the ship from A to B. The guys who look pretty on the bridge, but also the guys and girls that aren't so pretty on deck, and get involved in the maintenance and day-to-day running of the vessel.
And what we might consider as not a deck officer would be an engineer, for example, somebody who might work below deck, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
You also said that you're currently working on LNG carriers, so liquefied natural gas. What does that mean? What type of a vessel is that? What is LNG?
So LNG, basically the stuff that comes out of your tap, the thing that lights up in your boiler,
Right.
what you cook your day-to-day things with,
Fuel.
that's LNG fuel, essentially. Yeah, heating energy for the world. So liquefied natural gas is that gas that's compressed 600 times and cooled to minus 160 in liquid form, and then we can transport it from A to B, wherever the world needs it.
And that's transported on board really big ships, or kind of what sizes are we talking about?
Yeah, huge ships, sort of 300 meters long, capacity 174,000 metric cubes.
Okay.
To put it into sort of relative terms, the UK needs around 50 of our shiploads per year for its energy.
Wow.
So if one ship comes a week, we can survive in the UK. So they carry it, an enormous amount of liquefied natural gas.
Wow. Okay. And are you typically bringing that into the UK, or do you have other routes that you would take the LNG to?
So the current outfit I work for, we've got about 44 vessels operating in all kinds of areas, Australia, Qatar, the US, all the big producers and suppliers of LNG. So in terms of the UK, there are routes from the US and then
Hmm.
Qatar, and they go normally into Milford Haven on the west
Hmm.
coast.
Nice. I'm from Australia, so I'm aware of some of the routes there. Do you get your gas from the Northern Territory part of Australia?
Yeah, yeah, northwest, and also
Yeah.
Gladstone. I think that's northeast. So yeah, a couple of areas around there.
Yeah, so I'm from a town called Darwin, and there's a gas pipeline called the Inpex pipeline, but we also get LNG carriers into Darwin port. I think they might mostly go up to Japan, though. Have you ever done that route?
No, but my next route is exactly that. So we'll be going from Australia to Japan or China every 10 days, taking all of your liquefied gold.
Lovely natural gas up. So does that mean that you're going to be able to go ashore in Darwin?
I think that the port's quite remote, and so I don't think shore leave is really a big thing. I mean,
Yeah.
the company like push for it, and so that there are opportunities, but LNG terminals are typically way out in the middle of nowhere. So it's quite a challenge often to get ashore. It's not like a
Yes.
container route where you sort of slap bang in the middle of the city.
Yes, yeah. No, I appreciate that. I can tell you that the one in Darwin is close enough to get to the city, but if you're actually going into Gladstone, you might be a little bit, more remote, as it were. If you want any tips on where to go in Darwin, I can recommend the Crocodile Farm and make sure you get to Kakadu, which is an amazing natural area owned by the Aboriginal people, the local people in the Northern Territory, and well worth a visit.
Oh wow, I'll definitely put that in my notes.
Yeah, do. And then give me a call and I can give you some more tips as well. But getting back to our conversation about shipping, so you're now on LNG tankers. You were on container ships. For people listening, viewing who might not know the difference, what's a container ship?
A container ship is like a multimodal sort of transport vessel that carries cargo in containerized form, so you can, really maximize the efficiency of space. And yeah, like it changed the world when it first came out all those years ago. So your large container carriers can carry up to 22,000 20-foot units. Huge capacity, carrying basically everything just in container form.
Yeah. So those 20-foot units that you mentioned, they're basically just the boxes, aren't they? They're the containers. They come
Yeah.
in two sizes, 20 foot and 40 foot, and they carry all the stuff really that we use and consume in our homes and in our lives. So trainers or I don't know, swimming apparatus or bottles. It's the ship that we would probably use the items off the most, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
right. The whole it's 90% of everything is shipped by sea, and that's 90% of it is all really containers full of everything.
Yeah, yeah. But weirdly, a lot of people still don't know about container shipping or tanker shipping or really shipping in general. What is your opinion about the kind of general knowledge about the maritime industry and how important that it is?
Yeah, it's super poor. I mean, me myself included, before I stumbled across Captain Phillips, I hadn't really thought about, shipping in general because I'm from Manchester. We're not by the sea. You
Yeah.
don't see ship. You don't really consider them or think about them as a career option or anything. And all my friends, I mean, I've never really met anybody from where I'm from that also works at sea. So it's really not well known about at all.
Hmm. I love the fact that you mentioned Captain Phillips there. And for anybody who does follow you on social media, they'll know your story. You had, kind of quite a unique introduction to or inspiration for getting into seafaring. For those of people who are listening who don't follow you, can you tell us that story?
Yeah, so I was gearing up to study law, and after my A levels, I thought, I'll take a gap year and see and do some things. And in that gap year, I watched Captain Phillips with Tom Hanks, and that
Mhm.
was about a Maersk container ship, the Maersk Alabama, which was hijacked by pirates in Somalia. And I thought that looks pretty adventurous. So I went on a bit of a rabbit hole Google search, typed in Maersk, and found out that they were running a sponsored program. And I thought, whew, fully sponsored, no student debt, see the world. Threw in a random application, and then yeah, I've just followed through with it, and
I mean,
started as a cadet instead of going to uni that year.
what a swerve, right? Your life could have been so, so different. And I particularly love the fact that it was Captain Phillips, the film, that inspired you, because, of course, our very first podcast was an interview with the real life Captain Phillips. That's Captain Richard Phillips, who is based out of the US. I don't suppose you've listened to the pod, have you?
I haven't, unfortunately. I
Oh,
will. I will take a listen.
I think you're going to have to. He's really, really interesting guy. He was really open about that experience, the way that it kind of affected him, affected his family, but the support that he got from the company as well. And meeting Tom Hanks as well, he said he was just an amazing experience and a really, really good guy too.
Oh, great! Yeah, I'm jealous. I
Yeah.
mean, not jealous of his experience, but jealous that you got to meet Tom Hanks.
No, exactly. So is that how, and is that why you Googled up Maersk, simply because it was the Maersk Alabama that was featured in that incident and featured in the film?
Yeah, that was it. I saw the guys on the bridge, and the hot topic and the communications they were having. I thought it just looked pretty interesting and exciting, and that was the first thing that came to mind. Or like, how can I look into this? Can't just type in ships. So I just typed in Maersk, and Maersk um, had run a massive sort of cadetship program in the UK for quite so many years, and they were based in Newcastle, and it was all online, and I just I digged in.
Yeah. And amazing that you did so, because Maersk, of course, is one of the biggest container ship operators in the world. It's also a multinational conglomerate with different parts of its business. And, you were able to benefit from that training program. What was it like studying in South Shields?
Oh, great! I really loved that place.
Uh-huh.
It's it's quaint, it's on the sea, so you can see the ships. You're close to the beach, but then you're also close to Newcastle. It's 20 minutes away,
Mhm.
and they've got a really great reputation for delivering, world class training. And it was a great time. I really enjoyed my time there.
Yeah, fantastic. And to come away from that training with no student debt and a guaranteed job, what a better
Yeah,
way to start your career?
definitely. Yeah.
Fab. So your social media content, it provides kind of lots of insight into life on board ships. They're hugely, hugely successful. What made you start doing the content?
It was a bit of curiosity, really. I was sailing with a Chinese second officer,
Mhm.
and he's always on his phone, always on TikTok. And you hear about TikTok and all this, and he put a video one day, and I remember it got a few thousand views overnight, and I remember thinking, wow, that's really cool. And he was just providing a little bit of an insight to the Chinese audience, and he kept saying, Joe, have a go and do it. So I thought, okay, and so I think my first video was me with him on the bridge wishing people Happy New Year in Chinese, and he posted it. And it
Uh-huh.
got a few thousand. Oh, that's cool. And I put it on mine, and it did pretty well. I thought, okay, I'll have another go at this, and it just went from there, really.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And how long ago was that?
So I started TikTok it would have been February 22.
22. So kind of starting the real wave of TikTok when it became really popular
Yeah,
around the world, which is amazing. You've now got over 300,000 followers on TikTok. Have I got that right?
yeah, something
Amazing.
like that.
Yeah, and about 150,000 on Instagram, I think. So you're doing brilliantly well. Your some of your most viewed that I was kind of looking through are actually really quite informative, and dare I say it, they're kind of quite technical, which you may not kind of think would be some of the most popular content that you're putting together. Things like, I think there was one, how we secure containers on board a ship. It's got 6.1 million views on TikTok. And what is the stopping distance of your ship, which was in response to a viewer question. That's got 7.1 million views, which is just, it's kind of mind blowing. Why do you think that content in particular is so popular?
I think that people like big things, right?
Yeah,
And when you see such a huge ship in the ocean, the number one question is, oh, how does it float?
yeah,
And number
yeah,
two is like, oh, I bet you can't stop that easily.
yeah.
And it's just, the big questions that people have when they think about big ships. And yeah, I guess it satisfies people's curiosity by having like a short snippet video where I balance technicality with a little bit of information as well.
Yeah, I personally find them really informative, and I quite like that bird's eye view into a world that we don't often see. What type of content do you find does really well?
Yeah, it is, answering the big questions really. How do we stay afloat? Things like that, they're really
Mm,
dumb things, but that you can deliver like a informative dose of shipping to people without it being too technical. I've had a few videos where I've gone a bit overboard with the technical and they don't do so well. But I mean that those are the ones I enjoy the most, obviously, because I'm passionate about the things that I do. But
yeah,
it's
so
yeah, the ones that get the most views are the ones that when you really dumb it down
yeah.
and
Well,
just
I don't think it's dumbing it down though, is it? It's kind of explaining what is a really technical situation, but in language that anybody can understand.
yeah, those are the ones I kind of get the hate off the actual real mariners, because they put in the comments, well, you've I've not elaborated fully on something, or I've used a different term.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. When I first started reporting on the maritime industry, I was having a few chats with people who'd been in the industry for quite a long time, and I clearly didn't say the right acronym or the right, term about something. And they do like to put you right quite quickly, don't they?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. But I actually think what you're doing is making the industry more accessible to more people because we're not all technically trained. We haven't all gone through the 4 years, cadetship and worked on board. So to be able to explain that in common language is really quite useful.
Yeah, well, that's what I try to do. I try to strike that balance between, technicality and making the videos easy to understand for everybody. I try and think if I'm making a video, will my mum understand it? Um, and so if I tick the box there, then I think, it's understandable for all.
Yeah, I think you should always use the mum litmus test. That is definitely the way forward. Being a mum myself, I feel that, and that's a good level to pitch it at. So thank you for doing that. I was just wondering, now that you've got so many followers, do you get recognized when you're out and about, members of the public?
Yeah,
You
I-
do.
I- and yeah. Especially like on nights out and stuff. Oh, you're the ship guy, or oh,
Oh
I've
my
seen you on
God.
TikTok and stuff like that. I've posted quite less in the last sort of year or so. But when I first started doing it, yeah, it's really kind of funny to have that.
Yeah. I have noticed that you've posted less in the last year or so. Is there a reason behind that, or are you just kind of taking a bit of breather and waiting until you're on your next rotation?
Because I've changed to LNG, it's been a really kind of intensive cross-training program from containers to LNG. So I've been super focused on that. So I didn't really have much time for content creation within that. I mean, I've tried and posted a few pictures, but I also don't want to make a fool out of myself making a video about LNG when I'm not yet an expert.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally get it. So it's been an intensive cross-training process is kind of how you described it. What have you had to do if I were a seafarer wanting to do that same process? What would I need to do to swap over from containers to tankers?
Well, to get your endorsement to sail on liquefied natural gas or even any sort of tanker, you need a 3 month stint as a supernumerary. And
Okay.
as you can imagine, not many companies really offer that because they don't really get anything out of you. They're essentially gifting you 3 months salary and training and everything to get you trained at the end, but it's a very select few.
Hmm.
And I was lucky enough to get a place on the Sea Peak program. And so, yeah, it is that. As a junior officer, you do one trip. As a senior officer, it's more tailored to your experience. But my program was 2 trips, a supernumerary, really to just learn the ropes of liquefied natural gas because it's just so vastly different to working on a dry cargo vessel, it's worlds apart. And I think that, you have an unlimited ticket when you get your license, but you can't just jump on another ship type because it's a completely different world.
Yeah. So I think we need to unpick that a bit for those listeners and viewers who are not seafarers. So you get a ticket and it's an unlimited ticket. What does that mean?
So when you get your license as officer of the watch, you're qualified to navigate, drive essentially any ship in the world of any size. And so you can do that, but there is some further training that's required if you're moving about the vessels, because your cadetship is such a condensed period of 12 months, and often some people do it on only one ship type. You then become really accustomed to that ship type. Say containers, you know how to load containers, ballast a vessel with containers on, etc., etc. But when it comes to loading liquid, it's very different. There's very many different safety procedures and bodies that govern all everything to do with that.
Okay. So how did you discover, or how did you get yourself on the program of retraining with the new company?
So I'd applied to CP Corp, formerly TK Gas, for about 5-6 years. I always was set on working on tankers. I'd done one tanker with Maersk when I was a cadet and really loved it. The difference between working on a tanker and say a container ship is that you're really a lot more hands-on with the loading of cargo.
Okay.
Whereas containers, you come alongside, you have the plan, you check the plan, you can make amendments to the plan, but you're not the one dropping the box on your ship, and you feel a bit helpless sometimes
Okay.
when you got your ship being loaded and you're heeling over and everything. But when you're on a tanker, and especially if you're chief officer, you're the one controlling like the mass loading of that product or discharging of that product, and it's more technical in that sense, and you get a lot more control. And I think that's what
So
I was always wanting.
that speaks to your kind of enjoyment of the technical aspect of the role.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, for example, when you're discharging, there's I guess no greater feeling than being in the control room. When you start the pumps to discharge, it's like a roaring feeling, and you've got the hum and everyone's around you, and it sort of feels like you're in, the NASA Space Center, and you ramp the pumps up, and it's just, a really exciting experience.
That sounds really quite unique. It sounds really physically, it sounds loud and like it's all immersive. Could you kind of maybe describe to us the process, or describe to us what it's like when you say that you're discharging or you onboarding the fuel? Can you kind of just talk us through what the experience is like?
So when you're loading fuel, you're at a terminal, you're connected to the arms in the same way as you are discharging. You've always got a loading master, a representative from the terminal with you. So when you're loading, the pumps are ashore, so it's all via radio. You're going through all the safety procedures, and you're balancing the tanks as you bring the cargo on board, through the manifolds. Like there's normally the 4 manifolds, and as you're discharging, it's that in opposite, where you're in control of the pumps and you're pumping all the cargo ashore.
And it's a fuel, right? Is it combustible? You're talking about safety checks. It sounds like it's really quite a controlled environment. Is that something that you need to be aware of?
Yeah, definitely. So liquefied natural gas expands when it's exposed to air 625 times and ends up as like a vapor cloud. And so you've got a lot of safety steps you need to go through because it can't enter the atmosphere. It's a closed loop system, an LNG carrier. And so it's, continuous deck checks to make sure that there's no leaks anywhere. Following the emergency stop procedures, we've got emergency shutdown systems on board, and we check them all before and during the operation to make sure that we're ready in case of anything.
And so you're putting it on board as a liquid, and then when you're discharging it, it's still a liquid, but when it's on board, is it staying in that liquid form, or is it
Yeah,
changing
it's
into gas on board the ship?
It's constantly in a liquid form, but LNG boils at -163, so it's constantly boiling off. Essentially, if you imagine sort of a glass of liquefied gas, and it's constantly boiling because it's evaporating because it's a liquefied natural gas, and so that boil off occurs when we're loading, especially like high boil off, because you're shaking it around, and that boil off we consume, we put through the engines. So that there's a lot of things to think about, especially vapor generation when you're loading and discharging, because you're shaking the cargo essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And this makes a lot more sense as to why you've had such an intense kind of retraining when you've moved from your container ships to your tankers, because it sounds like there's just so much that you need to consider in terms of the cargo and the ship operations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not to put down sort of work on container ships. It's just very different. Sometimes LNG carriers might only do one port a month or two ports a month, whereas um, container ships, they could do 20 ports a month. So you're in and out of port all the time, high traffic density, navigating all the time, little sleep, ballasting all the time, moving water all around the ship a lot more. So there's technical difficulties in both areas,
Yeah, no,
but it's just so
absolutely.
vastly different.
All
It's
different
like
types of ships all have different handling capabilities, don't they? And you'll need to learn all the different technicalities of the different ship types if you want to swap.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you've got an unlimited ticket, you can work on a big cruise ship, but if you've only worked on cargo, then you've never talked to a passenger. So there's all that aspect. So it's if you're moving around the industry, you need to undergo some sort of training to
Yeah.
to cross over.
Yeah, fair, fair. So now that you've kind of done it, or you're in the process of swapping over to a different vessel type, do you have any tips for any other seafarers who might be considering the same type of move?
Yeah, I mean, really try and do your research beforehand as well, and think about what you want in your career. Um, and don't just think, oh, I want to go to LNG, because a lot of people think, it's better money. Money shouldn't be like the greatest motivator. Think about what you really and truly want out of your career and your job on board. And if you want to really make that move, think about like learning a lot about it. Like read some of the technical publications that are out there, because these choices are not light choices. Every time you move around in the industry, you delay your pathway and promotion. So it's a big move to make whenever you're changing industry.
So you said something really interesting there. Every time you move, you delay your progression. You mean in terms of rank and going up the ranks because you're having to retrain and relearn?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Typically, I mean, a lot of industries, when you transfer, you have to go in the rank below. They'll say, "We'll take you, but we'll take you in the rank below." So you're sort of wasting all that time you've spent, in the last company, like working hard to get recommendations and seat time. And so you start as a fresh, compared to all the other chief officers and other um, second officers and third officers that have spent their whole time in LNG or in tankers or in passenger ships. You're fresh,
Hmm.
and you're joining in rank, but you're still taking a step back.
Right. And that's primarily because you don't have the experience. So you need to be on board to get that experience. There's only so much you can get, through written or through, other type of learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Experience is key, and it's
Yeah.
everything in this industry. You can have every ticket and read every book, but until you've sat there and pushed the pumps yourself and and taken the cargo on board and done all these things firsthand, hands on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best way of learning. And I guess when you make that move as well, you take a bit of a financial hit, do you?
Well, I'm really lucky and to have gone with CPeak, and got a place on that program, because their cross training program is sponsored, so you're on full pay as a supernumerary throughout the whole program. You might take a pay cut depending on what rank you go in, but CPeak were very generous in financing all of the program. It's pretty much the only cross training program which will do that.
Well, that's brilliant. I can imagine SeaPeak is going to get a lot of interest following the publication of this podcast. And I hope they do as well, because it sounds like they're a very supportive employer. I guess in general, though, if other seafarers are kind of looking to make that move, that might be a consideration that they have to make. They may be required to take a bit of a pay cut when they're moving ship. Is that a potential?
Definitely,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, there are ways of doing it. Say, if you want to take almost like an unpaid trip on
right.
with a company just to get the experience. So you're talking, say, a 3 month trip, earning not that little to no money, I guess, really.
Yeah, which
So
is
that kind of
tough, right?
it's definitely tough, and it's not really realistic for people if, depending on what stage of life you're at. If you're married and have kids, it's not realistic to take a 3 month outage. But if you're really willing to make the move, then you'll recoup those costs later down the line.
Yeah, and yeah, no, I completely get that. I guess we as Nautilus would really hope that there'd be more employers like your current one that would fully fund people to make that change. But we appreciate that there's business, requirements as well. So, I just hope that seafarers have the opportunity to have as much experience as possible in as many vessels. Can I speak? Vessels across as many vessels as possible without much financial hardship brought into the situation as well. So thank you for that. That was good tips for any other seafarers looking to change vessel types. Can I ask you about any memories that you might have that stand out from your time at sea? So anything that has particularly had an effect on you as a person or on your career?
The hardest part about being a seafarer is missing key life events, birthdays, anniversaries, um, friends getting married and things like that, but also like the passing of loved ones. And like I unfortunately had to experience the passing of my father whilst I was at sea, and I think that was the worst thing that's ever happened to me at sea, and something that we all kind of dread. Um, so that's like definitely a big downside.
Really, really tough and really hard to hear about. Do you feel like you
Yeah,
can talk about it? What happened?
no, yeah, I was on board, and I'd often dreaded, long sea passages, sort of 3 week sailings. And I was on a 3 week sailing, and I called my dad every single day whilst I was at sea for the
Yeah,
longest time since I started. And
yeah.
one day I called and called, and he didn't pick up, and it was early in the morning, and it got to about noon, and I called again. I thought, he's left his phone at home, he's gone out to sea, and so I got a friend to call around, and unfortunately, he'd gone in his sleep. Um,
Wow.
but having that sort of experience whilst you're at sea on a deep sea voyage is just horrific, really, and you don't really want to wish that on anybody else.
No.
Because we were sort of sailing past Madagascar at that point. The next port, because it was just at the end of the COVID range, the next port they said for cruise change was Montevideo, so that was another 3 weeks.
Oh my
But I was
goodness.
really, really, yeah, really lucky that the company were able to divert the ship for me. They really went above and beyond Maersk to get me off in that time.
That's
But
absolutely
that's yeah,
amazing to hear. I mean, we know how difficult it was during the COVID crisis to get people back home or even get them to their ship. And so the fact that the company would support and get you home quickly as possible is absolutely amazing. I think you raised some really, really serious points there, though, right? For seafarers, there is that kind of acceptance in some way that they do need to give up a bit of a family life when they're at sea, which can be really difficult for a lot of people in a lot of circumstances. What support do you have on board ship when something like this happens?
so really lucky with Maersk and CP and sort of first class companies. They have
Yeah,
networks and support systems that you can call anonymously and receive some advice and support. We have good internet, which is we're really lucky to have compared
yeah.
to a lot of the world's kind of
So you were able, oh, you just paused, just, yeah, there you go. That's
yeah.
okay.
Um, and we're really lucky in terms of having good people on board. We the company like Maersk and also CP, is very selective on who works for them, and so luckily we have good eggs on board,
Yeah.
and that's
And
just really important to have good people that you can talk to at all times.
absolutely, at all times, but particularly when you're going through something like that. Were you able to stay in contact with friends and family at home?
Yeah, it was quite rough because we were sailing through a blockout patch at that point, but the satellite phone was available, and so I was able to make calls. But the biggest sort of reminder was that it is a sacrifice going to sea, and as much as people will watch a 30-second video of you know the glorification of travel and all the nice perks, it is a reminder that, you know, it's the biggest sacrifice you can make by you know, spending half your life at sea.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know you were really close to your dad. I can see that from, hear that from what you're saying today, and I can see it from the content that you had as well. Were you able to come back and honor him, for the funeral and with family and friends?
Yeah, so I got back about 4 days later.
Okay.
Luckily, thankfully, the company diverted the ship and I was able to get home in Cape Town.
Mm.
So that was good. It was only 4 days, but I didn't unfortunately get to see him because it was the end of COVID and
Mm.
the time had passed.
Mm.
Um, but you know, I have to count the blessings that I was able to get home on time.
Mm-hmm. I'm really sorry to hear about that. That does sound like something that was very difficult to go through and hard to accept. Are you able to access, support and counseling if you need it now when you go back to sea?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's there and available for all of the crew, which is
Mm.
really good. And again, and we're lucky to have that because I spend a lot of time volunteering with the Seaman Centre
Mm-hmm.
and Seafaring Centre,
Mm-hmm.
and that really opens your eyes as to the you know the state of most ships at sea, and then the majority do not have any kind of support system or network there available.
Mm. We know this as well through our work with the International Transport Workers Federation. They have a network of what's called ITF inspectors who often go on board ships and make sure that the crew are being paid correctly and that, they're being treated fairly and all that type of thing. And we know that some seafarers spend a really, really long times at sea, anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to 9 months, and sometimes in some very tricky situations beyond 9 months as well. So having a support network is really important, isn't it, while you're on board that ship?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Mm.
again, yeah, I'm grateful for that. And it's something that I used to take for granted, but not anymore.
Mm.
You know, I um, really appreciate everything that I've got and I'm at the moment.
Mm. And can you tell us a little bit more about that volunteering that you do at the Seafarers? So, what was it again? The Seafarers Association? Have I got that right?
The Seafarers Centre. So I
Yeah, that's
volunteer
it.
at the Liverpool Seafarers Centre. So for those who don't know what a Seafarers Centre it's a voluntary, not-for-profit organisation funded by a few different places, the church, um, large shipping companies, and it offers services to seafarers in port. You know, we'll drive a van and we'll take seafarers ashore, bring them SIM cards, take them to the Seafarers Centre, so you know they can just relax, use internet, call home, have a bit of a relaxation time whilst they're off the vessel. And so that facilitation is really important. And there's networks of seafarers centres all over the world which provide access for seafarers, because it often is very difficult to get ashore, because of, you know, terminals being in the middle of nowhere, or people not really having that much time off. And you know, just to get out of a port sometimes might take 2 hours, and if you've only got 4 hours off, 2 hours there, 2 hours back, it's a no-no.
Yeah, it's an absolute lifeline for a lot of seafarers, isn't it? And I've been to the Liverpool Seafarer Centre. It is an absolutely brilliant service that they do there. And it's really amazing that you're doing volunteering with them. I do hope that if anybody is listening or watching this, and they do need that extra support while they're in port, either in Liverpool or elsewhere, I know we have them all around the UK, don't we? That it's a
Yeah.
vital service, and do take advantage of that if you need it. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I don't imagine it was easy to do that, and I hope it does help anybody or somebody else who is listening to this podcast. What advice, if any, would you give to somebody considering a career in shipping?
Definitely spend a lot of time before you go into it thinking about what ship type you want to work on, because as I said, often when you choose a cadetship, you're often with one specific company and on one specific vessel, and then as you finish your cadetship, you tailor to that vessel. So you're really locking yourself into a specific ship type. And you know, we often talk about this unlimited ticket, but it is difficult to transfer. And so have a real think about where you want to work. If you like people, if you like talking, if you like traveling adventure, then think about cruises. If you're a bit of an introvert, then think about, the cargo. Just think about, have a good think about where you want to spend your time on board.
Yeah, I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
how does somebody find out, what it's like to be on board without having any knowledge of it? But I guess they can watch your videos, they can look at other social media accounts because there's loads of people doing similar things now, isn't there? Showing the world what it's like to be on board a ship. But interestingly, you also just said there, maybe think about your own personality and what would fit you, what type of environment you would like to be in your place of work. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're a people person, you like to talk to people, then maybe sitting on a cargo ship with 25 others might not suit you. If you're a real extrovert, then you want to get out and talk to people. So cruises might be the way forward for you.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you like your own time, or you like being away from it all, then maybe think about cargo. A great I've always said, like, a great cadetship provider is Trinity House, because they offer such a varied cadetship. Amongst the 12 months, you've got, I think they normally put you on 3 or 4 different types of vessel. You go on a passenger vessel, you go on uh, a tender vessel, you'll go on an LNG vessel, you'll go on a container ship. You get a real spread. And a lot of the charity cadetship providers offer that experience. So I'd definitely go for that.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. And for those people who don't know Trinity House, it's a UK-based charity, which, amongst many other things, also sponsors young people and anybody actually who's interested in becoming a seafarer. Finally, what is next for you, Joe? What is coming up on your agenda? Where are you heading to next?
I am joining Woodside Donaldson. She's a LNG tanker built in 2009. She's just in Shenzhen at the moment, in China, in her dry dock. So she's having a big sort of 15-year retrofit upgrade, um, extensive dry dock. And so I'll join her, and we'll be going from there to Australia and Japan and China, and on that run.
Yeah, amazing. So we've got the conversation all the way back to Darwin, Australia, which is where I'm from. So I feel like my work here is done. Thank you. How long do you expect to be on that vessel?
3 months. But it's a really
3 months.
exciting sort of trip for me, because it's the first vessel after my cross training program. So it's my first operational trip in rank. So a lot to learn, a lot to experience, and yeah, a lot of nervous times, I guess.
Yeah, nervous but very exciting. Can we expect to see some videos coming from this journey?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm hoping once I'm really settled in, to get some content out there about LNG ships, and show the world what it's like to work on LNG, and what LNG is, because most people don't even know what it is.
100%. 100%. And that is why we asked at the top of the conversation what exactly liquefied natural gas was. So thank you so much. I really look forward to seeing those videos. I hope you have a great time on your next journey, and really appreciate you speaking with us today. So, Joe, thanks for coming on the pod.
Thanks.
So, Robert, what did you think about Joe the Sailor?
Well, I have followed Joe the Sailor for quite some time.
Me too.
After I started working for Nautilus and I came across him, I thought, even for me, breaking down some of the bits about the maritime industry, because I don't come from a maritime background, I find he's really engaging content. But I also thought, Helen, I must admit this to start off, I thought it was brilliant. Plenty of references to Darwin. You can take the woman out of Darwin, but you can't take Darwin out of the woman. You had to get that in there.
It was a unique upbringing, I have to say, and it obviously has a special place in my heart.
Of course, yeah.
Love you, Darwin.
And of course, the other mention of Captain Phillips as well, who, as you highlighted in the podcast, Helen, we actually interviewed Captain Phillips. Our first ever episode of this podcast series was with the Captain Phillips. So I just thought that was really interesting. Actually, that's sort of one of the bits that, one of the key points, moments for Joe as to why he got involved in the maritime industry.
Yeah, it kind of blew my mind, to be honest. That was the thing that really stuck in my mind as well. It's like his life could have been so different, right? He was going to university, he was going to study law. He really didn't have any knowledge himself about the maritime industry or job opportunities within it. And then this almost chance encounter of watching the film Captain Phillips has completely changed his whole outlook and his whole future. And we are all the better for it, because now we can almost feel like we are having those experiences alongside him while he's at sea.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm not sure there are many people who would watch a movie about being captured by pirates and think that's the job for me, but fair play to Joe for that. I think there's a couple of other things, Helen. I mean, one, I think from our point of view, the training aspect, he was talking about how long it does take to train to work on LNG, and I just for for a serious moment for a second, this is something that we talk a lot about at Nautilus International, is access to training. Particularly, we know that there are these global targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by around 2050 at the IMO, and Joe was very honest saying he's very lucky he's been able to get the training, fully paid, but not everyone is. And I think there is a point there. Again, it's a point that we constantly talk about, but a point to reiterate how this training does need to be accessible, because this is the way the industry is going.
No, absolutely. I mean, Joe has been very, very lucky throughout the course of his career, both when he started on container ships with the world's biggest container ship operator, Maersk. That was a fully funded training experience that he had. And then moving into tankers with another massive company, Seapeak, and also being fully funded. These are not common experiences within the industry. These are really your blue chip companies that he's been very lucky to work for. And we would argue, of course, that all companies, all employers should be giving the same experience and opportunity to their workers, to their seafarers, to retrain and to keep their training up to date. And as you said, to learn about the new technologies being brought into the industry by our moves to try and decarbonize the industry and through other forces. And you just mentioned the IMO there, Robert. Just for anyone who isn't aware, that's the International Maritime Organization. It's a UN body that regulates the global shipping industry.
Yeah, and I think it's just back to this, something that we talk a lot about at Nautilus, is the just transition, and how, the just transition and training is absolutely central to that. The other thing, Helen, I just want to mention, I thought, when Joe was talking about the passing of his father, it was a really open, sort of emotional moment for him. And I think, again, an incredibly difficult time for Joe, but I guess it also just underlines the sacrifices that seafarers make. These people do give up so many parts of their lives in order to keep the global economy going, to get us the goods that we talk about. And so I just thought it was, again, another point to recognize, that these are difficult careers. This is not an easy thing to do, and yet we rely on it so much.
We absolutely rely on seafarers for, as we said, 90% of everything that comes into this country. So, and that became really apparent during the global coronavirus pandemic, didn't it? When, so many of us were stuck at home. We weren't able to travel. We weren't able to go into our places of work. And yet seafarers were still out there on the high seas, bringing us all the goods that we kind of relied on to get through. So, we really need to keep reminding people of this fact, and to support those seafarers through the good times and the bad times as well.
Exactly that, Helen.
Yeah. Well, Robert, I absolutely loved meeting Joe, and we will, of course, put links to his social media accounts in the show notes so that our viewers and listeners can start to follow him as well. I'll also put a link to our Maritime Barometer survey into the show notes, and some information on how you can join Nautilus. If you're a maritime professional working at sea or at shore, we would love you to come and join us. So, Robert, thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you, Helen.